Hey YouTube, welcome back. So today I thought we would take a look at blame shifting, how to recognize it, what it actually is, and hopefully I'm going to do mini segment videos covering each of those. I have done the first part of my gaslighting one. Today is obviously going to be the blame shifting. We'll do stonewalling, misdirection, triangulation, etc., and give you hopefully a real life example of what they look like so they're easy to spot. So I'm just going to pull up an article from psychologytoday.com. I'm going to read briefly. I'm going to read a brief portion of it just so that you understand blame shifting. So blame shifting, like gaslighting, at its core is simply lying. Okay, it's the pathology of the lie, the intensity and the amount of time that those lies run for. Okay, that's what makes it gaslighting, the long-term attempt to alter somebody's reality. But it is simply just lying. That's all the individual is doing. But again, I'll reiterate, it's the intensity and the pathology of those lies that make it gaslighting. Anyway, under gaslighting come other tactics that a narcissist or a toxic individual will use, again, to either avoid being accountable or responsible, but thus in turn altering the reality. All right, so there are different forms of gaslighting. Gaslighting can be utilized in different ways. You can use it as misdirection because you are changing what the issue is and trying to get the individual to look in a different direction. You could say blame shifting because you are again gaslighting the person that any blame is not yours and you're shifting the blame around, trying to find other ways and examples or things to throw around to get yourself off the hook. There's deflection. Deflection is a form of gaslighting because again you are attempting to alter the truth in some way using other things to deflect upon for the individual to look at rather than what you're both supposed to be looking at. So I'm just going to read briefly from this article. Just let me find my paragraph 1 second. Okay, so I'll just cover again that blame shifting is a variant of gaslighting. This is how blame shifting works, and it is simply, just as the name suggests, about shifting the blame around. So for example, you might have someone that when you confront them about something, they say it's a joke. It was just a joke. It's just a joke. Rather than them acknowledge what you're trying to tell them, such as what you're saying is hurting me, or it's bothered me, or why would you say it? You won't get an answer to those specific questions, and this is what you need to look for, and this is why we need to be more mindful in communication and observing speech patterns and what people are really saying, and that actions do back up the words. So for example, if you were to approach somebody and tell them what you said, I found hurtful, like why would you do that? And they throw back at you, it was just a joke, right? There's an example of blame shifting because they're shifting the blame from themselves for the thing that was done that you've gone to confront them about. Rather than, see, here's what would be a healthier response, for example, right? So you take your issue to this person and they would say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, it wasn't meant like that. So there's the self-accountability part. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I never meant it like that. Then they would say it was just a joke. Okay, so they've been accountable, and then they've explained I was just joking, and then they'll probably add on, I didn't mean to hurt you. Okay, it wasn't supposed to be hurtful. That would be a healthy response. A more narcissistic response would obviously be, it's just a joke, why are you upset? When we all know as adults, the idea of a joke is that both parties find it funny. If somebody's not laughing and they're actually hurt or affected or offended by it, then who was the joke for? It was clearly just for yourself, because your company isn't finding the joke funny, and when they do say something to you about it, you shift any blame and you just basically say, get over it. It was a joke, okay? So that would be a perfect example of blame shifting. So here's how blame shifting works according to psychologytoday.com. This particular form of manipulation depends on the abuser really knowing your weaknesses and tendencies. Among them, you might be steadfast avoidance of conflict, or your proclivity to play the peacekeeper, your tendency to backtrack on your positions, your desire to please, your own insecurities and doubts about yourself, and your tendency to question the validity of your thoughts and feelings. Okay, most of the people caught up in this web grew up in households where their emotional needs weren't met and they were unloved, unsupported, or downright picked on in their families of origin. This is also true of the abuser, but he or she has learned to cope differently. Okay, so this is how, when I'm telling you all, or trying to educate, that we give away so much through our words. Like this just says, okay, if you are an individual that is using blame shifting techniques a lot, all right, you have learned that from your upbringing, okay? If you're somebody that is always falling for blame shifting, people blame shifting when you confront them, it is often because of what I just listed. Maybe you have a steadfast avoidance of conflict within you, okay? Maybe you do have the proclivity to play the peacekeeper. Maybe you do have a tendency to backtrack on your positions. Maybe you do have a desire to please. Your own insecurities and doubts about yourself. So if you have insecurities and doubts, which often we all do, blame shifting utilizes those in order to work you, okay? If you do have those doubts about yourself, we're the type that we question the validity of our own thoughts and feelings. Like I'm more in the recovery stage of codependency now, okay? But I'll say we as in when I did this a lot more than I do it now, okay? We're unsure of ourselves. So when people are saying, oh no, you did get that wrong, it was just a joke, and your gut knows it wasn't a joke, it was a dig, right? We are the types of people that, rather than believe in our gut and how we feel about it, we will, and typically we've got the steadfast avoidance of conflict within us. We are very easy to, we backstep, we backtrack, okay? So the person saying, no, it wasn't meant as a joke, it was meant as a joke, what's your problem? We're the types typically that will allow that to be the narrative, rather than sticking with our gut and standing firm and being empowered with our own thoughts and feelings. Instead, we roll over pretty much and allow the other person to run the narrative that they want. Even if we know different, we're often those types of people, okay? And we are often, more than often, the ones caught up with being in situations where blame shifting's going on and we don't recognise it for what it is. And like it states here about the abuser, if you've got somebody, like I've mentioned in another video, if you are dealing with a narcissist, narcissism doesn't just come about on its own. If you've got a narcissist in front of you, it was a narcissist or worse that raised them, okay, period. It's the lack of nurture that creates the narcissist. And as it says here, whereas we're the ones that have had this kind of style of upbringing, downright picked on in our families of origin, we were either unloved or unsupported, or our emotional needs weren't met. The same is said for the abuser who is using those techniques. Okay, they have and this is how narcissism is passed down generationally as well, because the child learns the behaviors and the techniques from the parent. Okay, and that child either breaks off, there's a false self comes forward to take on the abuse, or often we grow up with other issues, and in my case we grow up as codependent adults. Most of the time the abuser doesn't look you in the face and say to you, this is actually all your fault, because although he or she might do from time to time, but it's usually a lot more stealthier than that. Let's say, for example, you complained about his or her behaviour and the argument escalated until suddenly the abuser says, I wouldn't have acted that way if you weren't always nagging me. Or, if you didn't always start in when I'm dead tired from work, I wouldn't lose my temper. Or, if you weren't always focused on you and your needs, we wouldn't be fighting. The chances are good that the guilt tripping works because you want this relationship to thrive, okay? And this is again where I mentioned in my videos about recognizing and being more mindful of specifically what's going on in front of us, okay? Because if we are being guilt tripped, or if somebody's trying to guilt you, you know what that feels like. It's very uncomfortable when somebody's guilting you. It is the tactic of an abuser, okay? Someone that uses abusive techniques to get their way. So if there is somebody in your life or in your family, I know in my community, there's a lot of us that have parents that are profound guilt trippers. They play on the empathy to get you and to keep you in control and in line. It's very toxic and very unhealthy for the mind, because they're inducing a state of guilt in you that isn't you feeling it on your own, right? It's being induced, manipulated into you. It's psychologically abusive. So the chances are good that that kind of guilt tripping works because you want the relationship to thrive, and suddenly you will feel awful and you'll hear yourself apologize, since your goal is to have things work out between you two, and you don't even recognize or see that you've been played. All right, just let me find my next paragraph. Okay, so why do narcissists and controllers blame shift? The obvious answer is that it permits them to dodge responsibility for their words and actions. What's more convenient than having a ready fall guy or a scapegoat? Plus, being right all the time is a dandy confirmation for the narcissist, reinforcing how strong and superior he or she is, despite the deep shame that sits at the core of the self like a poisoned pit. The narcissist ascribes what he or she is feeling to the target. Okay, so in other videos I've spoke about how the narcissist will transfer what they should be feeling and what they are feeling onto you. And I think I explained it in a and I used an example about jealousy. If the narcissist is feeling jealous, maybe you got some attention from a store worker, okay, or someone whistled at you walking by and the narcissist heard it and they're feeling jealous, right? And they can't stand the idea in their mind that that might have lifted you up a bit or flattered you. So because they're jealous, they will generate a scenario to make you jealous, okay? Maybe they will tell you something about an ex getting back in touch with them, somebody reaching out to them, an ex-girlfriend. They will bring up something, maybe your friend. Oh, your friend looked really nice today, her hair was nice. Maybe the next time you go out to a restaurant, it might be in a week's time, for example, right? So a week after the narcissist has observed you getting a wolf whistle by some guy down the street. So a week after, you're out at a restaurant with the narcissist, and then he or she may flirt with the waiter, for example, or waitress in front of you, bold as brass. Just strike up a conversation and they'll start being very flirty, very tactile. And that will be your punishment from a week earlier when some individual decided to flatter you or pay you a compliment. That is how twisted and calculated they are. They punish you for how they feel. So here where it's saying, let's let me find my place. One second. Where I was saying the narcissist ascribes what he or she is feeling to the target, okay? But this particular example, we're using the guilting, remember, that I mentioned earlier. So that too undermines the target's sense of their own perceptions, even though they can see that the person in front of them is red in the face, the jaw muscles are working, their arms are closely held against the chest, and they are telling her that it's her or their anger that is wrecking the relationship. And that individual, that target, will be apt to believe it, okay? And again, this is why I reiterate in a lot of my videos, we have to be conscious of how we feel, right? Because otherwise we are so easy to be manipulated to feel a way that isn't ours. So, for example, I don't want to use somebody in the community, but if we observe how things went on over on Ladies' Night, she manipulated the audience to feel as angry towards the individual that she had an issue with as though it was their issue, right? You go back and you read some of those super chats, the aggression, the anger that was expressed in them. Many of those people didn't even know the person that they were directing that to. They hadn't even heard the other individual's side. They probably weren't even interested in hearing the other person's side. They were manipulated, a lot of them, in my humble opinion, into feeling that way towards whoever was the person that was being dragged that particular night. And it's so easy to have happen to us. Another individual can absolutely manipulate us to feel a certain way, and we won't even recognize that it's happening unless we have boundaries, we are mindful, and we know our red flags, okay? And understanding what blame shifting is knowing one of your red flags, because once you can recognize that and you know what it's called, it helps you identify it when it's happening, okay? So start looking out for it in real life. When you confront somebody about something, okay, do they address what you've said, or do they jump on to an excuse or whataboutism, dodge the blame, shift the blame, use a scapegoat, or turn it back around? And, you know, things like "you're too sensitive," that's another excellent blame shifting example. It's because you're too sensitive. They will never, people who blame shift, they will never acknowledge what your issue is. So if your issue was you were hurt by what they said, you will not hear the words, "I'm sorry you were hurt by what I said. It was a joke. I didn't mean any offense." Okay? You won't hear those words. They're the words you need to look for. An example, it's because you're too sensitive. They will never, people who blame shift, they will never acknowledge what your issue is. So if your issue was you were hurt by what they said, you will not hear the words, "I'm sorry you were hurt by what I said. It was a joke. I didn't mean any offense." Okay? You won't hear those words. They're the words you need to look for, or similar. That's a healthy response. So when we confront somebody, right? And this is, again, what I reiterate in my videos, how our reactions and responses give away everything, right? So this is what you would look for. If you confront somebody about something and you say, "When you said A, B, and C, it affected me. I felt kind of hurt by it. Why would you say that?" If you get a response, "It was a joke. You're too sensitive. Why did you take it like that?" Well, that's your own fault. None of they're blame shifting responses, because they are not acknowledging what you said. A healthy way to acknowledge what you said would be, I'm sorry that you are hurt by what I said. It wasn't meant in that way. It was a joke. Okay, I apologise if it offended you, because you are acknowledging and validating the issue that the individual brought to you, rather than blame shifting it away and putting it back on the person. Okay, it was just a joke. You're too sensitive. They are all perfect examples of blame shifting. Is there anything else I need to read out of this article? Give me 1 second. No, there is just a closing statement at the bottom that pretty much just reiterates what I've just said. It says at the bottom, once you've identified blame shifting, you will see that it's a persistent pattern of behaviour. Take heed, take your warning. That is your red flag. Healthy adults don't blame shift. That's how simple and easy it is. Okay, so if you confront somebody one time, right, and they blame shift, okay, that's just one time, right? Maybe they're having a bad day, maybe they were in a mood, maybe it's the weather, who knows. However, for me, 2 times it's your cut off. The second time is the cut off for me, right? So if you confront them again at a later date about something else, and again, they blame shift. Wasn't my fault. It was a joke. It's on you. You're too sensitive. You shouldn't have took it that way. It wasn't meant that way. There's your second example of blame shifting. So for me at that point, I'd cut it off, because I can see that each time I've gone to the person, like, do I want things to be hard work, or do I want people that could communicate clearly with me? Me, I just prefer these days, and coming out through all this abuse recovery, people that just communicate clearly, right? That hear you, and that you feel hear you, okay? So for that second time, mine would be the cut off, okay? But you might be different. You might want to have your boundary set to 5 goes, okay? So you see the blame shifting once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and then 5 times you cut off. If you're seeing it the 2 times, this is my point. This is why my boundary is at 2 times, okay? If you're seeing it 2 times and there's other things going on as well that are red flags, for me, that's my cut off. Blame shifting isn't done by accident. It isn't done because when somebody comes to you, think about it as healthy adults. If someone comes to us genuinely, you know, Sonia, can I speak to you? When you said this the other day, it kind of offended me. What did you mean by it? If I was to just say to that person, God, you're too sensitive, right? That's an example of me blame shifting. But if someone approaches me and says that they've been genuinely hurt, that bothers me. It does bother me, right? So I would take the time to explain and have a conversation with them without blame shifting, right? I would want to validate and acknowledge what it is that I did or said that did affect them, okay? And I would be open to having a conversation about it. Blame shifters, you don't blame shift by accident. Think about it, how you are if someone was to approach you to talk to you about something that you said or did that hurt them. Would you just shut them down, bat them away? Or would you want to hear what they had to say? Would you care about what they had to say? See, I would care about what they had to say. There's a difference between someone with constructive criticism or a genuine issue than someone just, I don't know, calling you a liar, you know, all the kind of names that go on just flippantly, all right? So pay attention, start spotting blame shifting in your real life, teach your children how to spot it, okay? Because I believe we should have been taught these kind of quick and easy red flags in childhood. The earlier the better, okay? Because you want your children, or we want our children, to have healthy friends and healthy relationships and avoid the toxic ones. Knowing these tactics help us avoid the toxic ones. And for me, I'm 40, I was in my late 30s when I came to, I don't know, being more enlightened about myself. And I think that's too late. For me, I wasted over 3 decades, 4 decades almost, not living in reality, being messed around, being manipulated, being lied to, never being sure of myself, never being confident within myself. And just by learning all these red flags and knowing a few other pieces of information, all that could have been avoided and things could have been a hell of a lot different for me. So take heed, okay? Look for blame shifting, recognise it. It is a form of gaslighting, it's toxic, it's abusive, it's psychologically abusive. Watch out for it. That's all for today. I hope you found that helpful. Leave a comment below. If you like, consider subscribing if you haven't. Love lots, and until next time, bye for now.